Great. Thank you for joining today. My name is James Mansfield with Analytics for Living. I'm pleased to share today our solution around tender management and demand analytics with artificial intelligence. So our objective today is to review and discuss Analytics for Living's artificial intelligence machine learning approach, where we can predict global, country, and industry tenders for both demand and business-to-business and business-to-government customers. Our agenda is as follows, but first we'll start with a quick disclosure that the views here are views of myself and not of any prior client or company as well. We're going to jump in first with a quick introduction, then talk about tender management. What is it? How big is it? How many are there in terms of tenders? And then talk about demand planning, some of the challenges and opportunities. Then share a few case studies that we have around applying machine learning and artificial intelligence to tender management and demand planning. Finish off with a little bit of analytics services and then have a discussion. Feel free if you have any questions during the session to kind of send a quick chat. I should be able to see it and respond. And thank you very much for participating today. So let's jump in. Great. So Analytics for Living Data Prime. So I'm James Mansfield. You see there? Hello. And I have responsibility or lead Analytics for Living, where we apply machine learning and AI to improve healthcare, innovation, technology growth, financial stability, sustainability. And I'm also the lead consultant and the life science lead for Data Prime AI. I have 25 years in life science, as well as consumer packaged goods and financial services, most recently coming out of Merck and GSK. So I'm quite familiar with a variety of tenders and tendering, given the global responsibilities. Not on the call today, but also one of our partners is Tyler Roth with Data Prime. So one of the solutions that we have and why we partner with Data Prime is that Analytics for Living gives all the analytics, right, the solutions. But if, as a client, if you have the services, right, or the products and services, right, you may need talent, right, and that's where Data Prime comes in. They're really focused on talent acquisition. Tyler Roth comes with many years of experience with the U.S. government, the military, Amazon, Comcast. So when we do need staff or you need staff, right, we have that partner there that we can help support. So let's jump into the content here. So tender management, kind of what is, oops, I hit the button there. So what is that? So tenders, right, just as a grounding, what we're talking about is country and global organizations, right, with public oversight, meaning where they have public funding or public responsibility, they publish a tender, right, also known as a request for proposal or a bid, right, or a request for information. So if you hear like an RFP or an RFI, right? So tenders are published by the country or the global organization. And in response, businesses then respond to the businesses, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about here when we talk about tenders. And that's where I circled here procurement, right? So typically you may hear procurement kind of maybe the organization that either sends those tenders out or kind of waits to kind of handle some of the purchasing, right, as well. So the World Bank estimates that there's roughly about $9.5 trillion in public contracts around the world spent per year, right, and continuing to grow. And that tenders and public contracts represent roughly 15 to 20% of GDP for most countries, at 15 to 20%, right? So it's a very significant amount of their GDP and spending as well. Now, on the challenges, though, right, on here, that the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime, right, the top one button on the right, does suggest that roughly 10 to 25% of public contracts overall of value may be lost due to corruption. So, that's one of the challenges there. So if we're talking about the data, right, where is all the data housed when all these tenders go out? So there's two great sources that, one we utilize that and have a lot of experience in is global tenders. We've worked with them a lot and, certainly have a great alliance with them as well to where we can utilize that type of data for analytics. And then the World Bank recently kind of launched their own front end kind of analytics on data and so forth. So we're still exploring that as well. But I think wherever you are of a client that needs some support, we're familiar with both data sets and also the ability to utilize those. But that's kind of the background on tender management as well. So where does it connect, right, in terms of demand planning? So if you're a manufacturer, right, or you need to be buying, right, or so forth, right, or you're a government kind of looking for things, right, demand planning is key, right? So with demand planning, it requires companies to kind of integrate a variety of different touch points, right? So forecasting, demand sensing, demand shaping, planning, manufacturing, supply chain fulfillment, right? And then also resources around that. So a lot of many different touch points along that piece, right? The other second point of that is amid this pandemic, right, COVID, which I put there in the middle, right? Unfortunately, demand planning is even more challenging, with unique and constant disruptions of that supply chain. So it's definitely key, right? So, certainly you have, individuals or people kind of looking at supply and demand. You have the ups and downs at the bottom right, kind of where we're looking for kind of some stability. But then when you have a pandemic, there's not much stability. And then top right is just an illustrative example of kind of the seasonal demand and the ups and flows, right? So with all this told, what's next, right? What are some of the key things? And the really trend and the opportunity, I should say, given there's technology and data available, is that the next generation of demand planning requires better data, right? Better predictions, a unified data model, right? Enhanced data forecasting, and most importantly, AI and machine learning, so artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, because there's a lot of data, a lot of information, right? And also the ability to operate in real time with collaborative tools, right? Collaborative tools meaning through your suppliers, through your distributors, through the buyers and so forth, right? That's definitely key. So how do you connect them both, right? So that's kind of where this is, right? So I think this next point here is to say that, right, integrating and employing advanced technology to tenders and demand is key, right? That's kind of why we're having this call today, is that the service offering that we look at is around tender management, demand analytics, right? A very key and important piece where we can integrate kind of that tender management into the demand planning process. And it's very, important to do so, right? The best practice, right, what some companies are adopting, and, we certainly suggest and can help, facilitate that, would be applying advanced technology, right? Using machine learning, artificial intelligence to capture and publish tenders, right? So if the tender's there in the database and you have it, right, now how can you use that and then predict moving forward? And we'll get into the next couple of case studies on that too as well. Second point here is combine the business's tender. So the other best practice is, if we have that data, that's not raw data, but really the data of all the tenders, right? Sometimes a company may have, you as your organization, you may have better insight into that in terms of what the volume was, or what the price was, or what the timing was, or really what happened behind this, that, or the other tender, right? So that type of insight's important, and it's not needed, right up front. But I think to get that model more accurate, it's definitely important to combine, the business's tenders, right? And why is that important? Well, it provides an accurate estimate, right, on the tender need. When is the tender, the timing, the country, the industry, right? And then the last point here is also, it would include the size. So like for instance, if it's a tender and it's a widget, how many widgets, right? And also what's the estimated price to win, right? If you have that history, then we can go in of both the win and the losses. We can at least see kind of what the win range is and the competitive country, so that when the next tender comes out, it's coming, and you already know up front kind of what the price should be, and whether what the price is to win it. And if you win it, is there an opportunity for profit or margin and so forth with that. So this is what we're talking about integrating both those pieces, tenders and demand planning together. Very important and key, and applying that advanced technology, right? So let's jump into an example we're talking about and why it's important, right? So, and I'm calling this illustrative, right? But we have done a lot of work in this space. So I'll tell you illustrative. We're going to play a little bit of a football, right? Because we're talking about Europe, or soccer if you're in the US, but football, right, is that stadium that's there on the right. I'm going to go to the left, and then I'll walk through the chart on the right. So tender management would apply, with applied machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? Why can we apply it? Well, the data is available. It's 10 plus years of data, right? So you have this robust data set, 10 years plus, and it's available to do analytics, right? So it's very key, very important, right? So, but one of the challenges is, how do you consume as a customer, right? When you're manufacturing widgets, right? To consume all that data, understand the data, model the data, integrate the data, put it in the cloud, update it in real time, right? And say, okay, what does it mean, right? And that's kind of where, our services come in to kind of help, facilitate that. So, and also the other point is, right, who has a core competency around machine learning, artificial intelligence in the cloud environment, right? And that's kind of where we would come in to help, because we do have that core competency around, analytics and data science, to provide integrated processing and predictions to know when a tender is publishing. So this whole point of this slide here is around when. Right? When is the tender, right? That's what point. The next slide, we'll talk about pricing. This is all about when. Additionally, The opportunity with technology is here where you can utilize the power of computers, right? And it provides, and I'll share in this example here, computers provide a more accurate prediction than a person and can possibly recall, right? Or then a person could even recall or remember or track or enter or even understand the volume of those tenders, right? So let me show you why on an example, right? And there is a benefit, right, to have the company where the company kind of outperforms the computer. But in the most case, you'll see with the gold stars on the right, it's the computer is kind of winning this game, right? So we're calling this a World Tender Championship, right? Which is really trying to understand, okay, when is a tender occurring, right? And I have a couple teams here. I'm not going to share the names, right? But we'll say country M, country U, right? There's Manchester United, and that's Team Madrid. And then the computer, right? We had a smart emoji there. And on the left is we're going to talk the kind of different examples, right, of tenders. And CPV, you'll hear a term often referred to as common procurement vocabulary. So common procurement value, what CPV value is, and Google it right now, take a peek. But what that says is it looks at all the industries and it categorizes the industry into a common procurement vocabulary. So let's say if it's medicines, right? Well, you look at medicines, and then you'd have human medicines, vet medicines, right? Or if you look at vaccines, you may have vaccines for influenza, you may have vaccines for COVID, right? You have all those different categories. So this way, it kind of is very specific. You're not having you do have to mine a lot of data, right? But you don't have to kind of, boil the ocean to kind of get that answer. It's kind of already pre-provided, permitted the data provider, has that, and people like us kind of have that understanding to help you to say, okay, what's your industry in? Let me see where that touches, right, in terms of those pieces. And it may cross a couple different ones, right, a couple different CPVs, common procurement value. So let's walk through this first example here. So the 4 examples I'll give were 3 historical and 1 for future, right? So the reason why I'm saying historical is if you have 10 years of data, and you know actually what happened, you can actually do the model and compare, right? It's almost like a test data set, right? So that's what we did here in this case is we had, two clients that were working on things, and we had that historical data available. So we ran the computer and we ran what they said, and we said, okay, who won, right? So the historical published data, country M said that there were 6 historical data, tenders, right? Country U said 5, right? But actually the computer found 8, okay, 8. And you wonder why. Well, does the person in the country capture them all? Do they enter all of those, right? That's kind of the question, right? So in this case, that was kind of one of those pieces. And then the computer said 8. So I gave the computer a star there, right? So that was a star for them. And then the next example we give is the historical win, right? Now, the flip side is the computer may not know who actually won, right? They may see the tender, but the wins are not always published. And the reason why is, a government is going to publish out a tender because they want to bid. But when it comes to who won that, right, there's no one saying, hey, I need to publish this, right? Many countries do have that data and it's published as available, but you have to go through, to get an information request. And there are some other ways to get at that, but it's not always published, but there are ways to get that. So in this case, right, the computer said, okay, everybody won because they saw 8, right? They may or may not had that, but country M really actually knew who won it because they won the 5 and country U won 3, right? So that's kind of the number. 3 + 5 is 8, right? That's kind of the number that you see there in a way, right? So they get the stars, right? But if we look at lost, right, there were a couple other, tenders that were here, right? If we had 8, country M, because if they only said 6, right? They had said 5 that they won, 1 that they lost, but there are actually 2 that were missed, right? If we look at country U, there were 5, 5 tenders published, right? 3 and 2, but there were actually 8. So the computer gets a star in that case, right? So that's the case. So now if we say, okay, let's look forward, right, to see kind of what's going to happen in the next year or 2 years about future publish, right? And what the computer's saying is they're going to be 10, right? 10 tenders, right? Whereas country M and country U say 6 and 5. Well, we know that that's right, sorry. So that's what the 10. So the computer gets the 10. Because this is from a historical study. So that's kind of that example that we have there as well. So I hope this is a good example of the World Tender Championship in terms of win. So let's jump into the next one, which is really interesting around price and volume, right? So how do we predict tender volume and price, right? So similarly, right, we utilize historical 10 years of data and we model using the machine learning and AI algorithm so we know the timing, right? And then if the data is published there where it does have the historical volume. So there's a few countries that, in Russia and a few others in Eastern Europe that do kind of capture the volume and the pricing. So you have that, and a handful of other countries around the world do. But in the cases you don't, I'll talk about that in a second, right? But in this case, right, we looked at those countries that did have this, and we're able to get a good accurate picture because one, we have when, and then we have the volume of the widgets, right? And then we know the price, right? And the price that was one, right? So that's great information because now it's there, right? Now, in the case of the countries do not capture, right, or they don't report the win volume or the price, right, that's where it takes a little bit more effort. But the approach that we have is some companies or many companies as a best practice are capturing that data, right? Did they win or did they lose, right? Most companies will know if they won, right? They may only capture if they lost, or as you saw in the prior example, they may only capture a subset of loss. Even still, that's still good data because we use that to model, right, to know what that historical is. And we can look at other benchmarks, right, around other countries that may have that data where we can kind of, come up with an estimate, right? So there's ways to kind of work at that, right? And in the case where there's no data, well, we could do some desktop research, right? There's always the Freedom of Information Act, right? That you can say, hey, I want to know, was this one and who won it? What was the price, right? And that's type of research that we could do in the local country to kind of get that answer for you on behalf of you to kind of find that out. Right. So the last point here, and then I'll walk in the example is, right, when we combine the timing, the volume, and the price into the model, right, we're able to better predict the estimated, tender of when, but also the price to win. Perfect. Okay, so let's walk through these examples here. So if we had 10 years of data, we had the data on volume and price, we did the model, and we said, okay, who gave a better accurate picture, right, of this? Okay, so in the column, it's volume and price. So if we think about this in X, Y, right, X is volume, Y is price, right? That's kind of the way that we have this, right? So in terms of volume, right, if we look at country B, right, they felt that the historical price was $2, right? I'm sorry, the price, I flipped that. There we go. So we're going to say it's $2 a price and $100 a buy, right? And then if we look at the country J, right, it was $2 in price, $95, right? But the computer, on the other hand, said it was actually $2.10, right, and 120 units, right, in terms of the volume was, because there's a lot more data that can model, but that was kind of the piece. So the computer won out on that one as a star. And if you kind of take a peek at that, it's a win, right? So that was kind of the accurate win, but there are actually more other winners in this, right? It just wasn't country B. There was with company B, right? It was in country B company within country B, there were many other players, right? So in that case, though, there were many other players that the computer captured where the country didn't capture because they thought they won everything, but there weren't, right? So that's kind of the issue there. If we look at loss on this hand, now the company in country B and a company in country J, right? In this case, right, they may not know, the actual price, right? Or they estimate it or they guesstimate it, right? They put it in the database, right? So in this case, they're going lower, right? It's saying $1.75. Right, it's $1.80, and it's only 95 versus 95. So, why do we see that happen in the data? Well, there's also, the situational bias or the administrative bias, those things that happen there. But the computer still saying it's $2 and 105, so the computer wins out on that, right? Now, if we look forward, right? So let's say this company, lost. This company lost. Now they want to win it. Well, we'd see kind of the the human factor come in, I think, here in this case, where the price goes lower, right, in terms of what they think it's going to be, and the volume maybe go a little higher, right? And in this case, the price goes a little lower from where they were, and the volume is still a little, a little lower, right? To be conservative. Now, are they leaving money on the table? I think is one of the questions they ask yourself. Well, the computer's saying no, it should be $2, right? And 106 is kind of the volume. So that's kind of the illustrative example of things that are at play here, right? You have the win, the loss, the human factor, the estimates, and a lot more data to model when you use machine learning via computers as well. So I hope you like those two kind of sports games there. One was on the World Tender Championship, and the next one was the World Tender Volume and Price Championship. So, definitely exciting. So let me go to the next point about why some approaches on this. So, we call this in terms of a collaborative tender and demand analytics and planning, right? And certainly these analysis that we did before, we do provide that directly to clients, and they could get a subscription, or we could license, or we do it ad hoc, right? But one of the points that's really valuable, as you saw, was to collaborate and get that data, right? So a couple different approaches that we have. So the first point I'm making here is that the demand planning can be syndicated to understand the time of tender. So we don't theoretically need, it would be great to have that from a company, but the syndicated solution that we have, right? We grab the data, we run the model, and hey, here's when the tender will be. You can certainly compare it to yourself, but that's one of the cases. I think, one of the exercises that I did share was, well, we'll do some validation, right? So if you do a subscription, send us your data, we'll validate it and see what the differences are, right? I think that's important to do so that everyone feels comfortable kind of on the approach, right? I think that would be a best practice to do, okay? When we get into volume and pricing, right? Estimates can be estimated, right? So I'm double estimate there, but the volume and price can be estimated when it's shared for by a client, right? So meaning if it's published, right? Right. So that could be shared for by a client. So if you wanted to know the volume and estimate, you give the price and we'll share it to you, client A, right? The other approach could be, right, to provide more transparency, right? Given that earlier point that 10 to 25% of um, tender values is lost due to corruption, right? Why not publish this on a consortium, right? Why not publish this in a tool so that there's more transparency to say, hey, machine learning said this is how many tenders there were, right? Machine learning said this is what the price is and this is the bottom. Hey, we may not publish out the time on when, right? Because I think that's important for people to be ready, waiting for it, right? And we don't want to put people under the gun to kind of say, hey, it didn't happen on this date and so forth. But but I think it'd be important to look at like the transparency on pricing, right, and volume. And transparency is key because there are a lot of corruption that's involved and so forth. But providing that transparency helps everybody, right? Helps everybody kind of understand kind of what the value is. That situation where prices are going down, well, we at least can kind of say, hey, here's what the the global or historical price value would be in terms of an opportunity. So this is one approach that I think we're available to do that as Analytics for Living, but it's certainly kind of a key opportunity for there as well. Right. So what is available, right? What do we have available? Just switching gears on kind of where, I know you're interested in this. So tender analytics is available for most industries and countries. So in terms of all countries, yes, all countries is available wherever that, is the data published, and it is for the most part everything. So let's just say the world is available, right? And it's segmented out by common procurement vocabulary. So, right. So that is available in all countries. Now, is every industry available? So I say pretty much most, I'd say, are all, but maybe there's some obscure one that's not CPZ, but for the most part, every industry is captured in the CPV, right? So the common procurement vocabulary. So at least you have kind of a view on that. Now your product or so forth may touch a couple different CPVs, so we can combine those and everything. But I think that's kind of the key that it's a clear opportunity to kind of look across everything as well. Okay, perfect. So I think we're almost out of time here. Yep, I know I got excited about talking about this. So, but let me let's finish off a little bit about Analytics for Living, and then we'll talk discussion next step. So, Analytics for Living, right? Our vision is to enable analytics for life, right? And it doesn't have to just be in healthcare, but we do really focus on healthcare, and we do other industries, particularly around tenders, right? So, the mission that we have is really for life-saving innovations for population and patient need. So, where this covers tenders, well, it could be other products and services really help people in the world. So that's kind of the space and where we fit, right? So it is one of our missions. It is one of our fiscal sponsorships to do this for tenders as well. So our foundation, Analytics for Living is a foundation. So it's a 501c3 charitable organization. So if you go with subscription, it's a donation, right? If you get a donation, then we provide you access to the the tender CPV of choice, right, for this, right? And then if you want to do something custom, right, and share data, well, that may go outside the guise of our kind of fiscal sponsorship, but we have services and a partner organization that we work with to support you throughout that process as well. And then the last point here is that we do have ML and AI syndicated products and consulting services, right? We quantify the need and do a variety of different pieces, right? And if you needed staff, right, to say, okay, you have this service now, you want to kind of manage on staff and so forth. So that's where Data Prime Bank, where we could partner and say, hey, we need a couple people in this country that have this skill set, right? And that's where Data Prime will really help us to kind of put that staff kind of in your organization too as well. So I really hope you enjoyed this discussion. I really enjoyed kind of sharing, and hope you like the sports there as well. Feel free. I saw a couple things in the chat. I'm going to turn off the record to answer some of those questions too as well. And please, call to action would be subscribe. If you go to our website, analyticsforliving.org, click on the subscription, you'll see the one for tenders. And you're welcome. If you're not ready right yet, then let's schedule a meeting and we could discuss. And I could share with you kind of what the output looks like. And then you're also welcome to attend a future Analytics for Living service and series that we put on the web. So thank you very much for joining today. Appreciate it. And I look forward to working with you closely.